So here's a few other things that I also researched in the past. Is they have a sound torture court here in Tri Cities, where instead of a regular court, they find somebody that might have seen somebody like interacting with the speaker or something, and then they find a pedo double in their voyeur site, and then that pedo double stands witness. And then they start basically, if they're a victim, then they justify pushing sound torture in and then they have like a whole court proceeding that justifies it. It's called the Court of Cook. And that I researched it many years ago. And that they also have like whole worlds in there that basically they have people that voyeur somebody, and then essentially their illegal court, which it's illegal, their illegal court essentially uses the testimony of a psychotic voyeur. And see, this is where I want to remind people that in a real court of law, if that voyeur was to take a witness stand or something, the one of the prosecutors or attorneys or whatever could they practice what's called discrediting testimony based on moral aptitude. And so people that psychotically secretly voyeur somebody can basically have their whole testimony brought into question based on their lack of moral aptitude that calls into question the validity of what they're saying. And that is basically the path that lawyers take when it comes to testimony that comes from people that probably shouldn't have been voyeuring that person in the first place. And see, if they're so amoral and so law breaking that they're willing to exploit somebody's life, then they're probably also willing to lie about that person, also, especially since they were basically racking up multiple years of exploitation of the person, that then that person becomes a liability to those voyeurs, and then most people that commit crimes usually are willing to lie even under oath about that stuff. And that's basically how you discredit the theoretical ideas that they use about getting testimony from voyeurs. See, the fact that the cops aren't willing to bust them for the crime of voyeuring also calls into question the validity of why the cop was even doing that stuff. Basically, see, if a cop sits there and allows some people to get away with crimes and then attempts to target somebody that becomes a liability to his own illegal behavior and then allows people to commit crimes and then basically uses fraudulent like testimonies and shit like that, yeah, it calls into question what the reasoning for the investigation or is in the first place. See, right when the cop notices somebody being a victim of voyeur exploitation, then that cop is under a law enforcement badge that cop is supposed to bust people that they see committing crimes. When somebody speeds by a cop sees that person committing crimes and issues a charge. So, when cops see people voyeur exploiting people online, they're supposed to issue, if they know who they are and shit, they're supposed to issue them a charge. A citation. I mean, they're supposed to. Because they're seeing it. It's just like if somebody litters. To litter, you have to litter in front of the cop. If the cop sees you litter, then they can issue you a citation. and that all of those people that they're witnessing breaking a law, they're supposed to issue those people a citation based on seeing it. And so, if cops aren't going to do their job, then it calls into question what their little investigation is really about. And so, this is where I really wonder because, when they start doing this like weird law justification shit, these are the things that I like researched in the past, and I wondered because it seems so outside of logic and rationality and their whole process that they utilize and shit as an attempt to justify basically what is a bunch of illegal behavior by an internal sex freak S&M club. And see, I know that about all of them. See, that's the thing I already knew. So when I usually have, I already know that, so I don't really have to spend any time knowing that what they're doing and the complete deviations from normal protocol. I know that it involves a reasoning that revolves around weird sex freak shit in the end. And so then I attempt to figure out and isolate what all their weird roundabout reasonings are. And then I attempt to build what the seemingly logical response to what they're showing people will be, because a lot of times they suffer from thinking internally in a groupthink, and then the whole reality of what they're doing is essentially building somewhat of like an evidence reason, and that then it's meant to be presented to outsiders, and that they tend to suffer from an inability of understanding what outsiders will view all of that type of shit as. And so a lot of times I don't know that the group is all an internal pedo band group. Basically, they don't ever know that. See, I know that stuff. That's why they're all in one little dark web. Because they all showed up at the convergence. And they all pedo bang, and I know that. Okay? Because they did that shit blatantly. Here in Tri-Cities. I mean, they're stupid as fuck, okay? And so, essentially, they operate under like a refusal. Some of their stuff is difficult to have data pulled out and stuff like that. And it's meant to be viewable without any ability of pulling the data out. And so then they seem to suffer from some real detachments on legal justification. See, they live in an internal world that has lawyers and shit in it, but that those people aren't really able to compete with what is, it's kind of like when these corporations, when they go up against anybody in a court of law, they have real lawful, logical lawyers who have the ability of logically stating a lawful opinion and stuff, and a lot of other people's lawyers aren't really good at that. These S&M clubs a lot of times are filled with lawyers that aren't really able to compete in an elite law world. And so the ways that I talk about law is essentially an elite justification that as you start to be more intellectual and more lawful and more logical, that's what the judges usually side with, basically. And so this is another thing, is like, basically, if a witness is admitting a crime in a court of law, then they're supposed to be arrested. And that they're documenting the evidence in confession. So if they were to be admittedly voyeurs, which is the only thing that they would ever be able to justify their witnessing about, then they would have to be cited for being voyeurs and criminals. Okay, that's a criminal offense. And see, that type of testimony, pretty much when it comes to like a defense, that's a really bad witness. And that then the judge is in some way tasked with making sure that the defense lawyer is building the best defense. And to be bringing people in and to be having them admit in a confession lawful setting of documentation, that is where essentially their testimony would require them to admit to breaking a law. Then they would probably need to be advised to be taking the Fifth Amendment, and then they wouldn't be able to justify how they would know anything. And see, that's a bad defense. So this is kind of the other aspect. So this is where, this is why I figure this stuff out, because, in the end, these fucking lawyers that they get advice from and these S&Ms and shit are fucking retarded as fuck. They are. Because they're not allowed to build shitty defenses for people. I mean, that's like where they have an law ethics, that they have to build the best defense. And see, a powerhouse lawyer will know that. And so if they're trying to use voyeurs to justify defenses, or like also these like illegal S&M investigations that they claim are drug metro investigations, they do it through illegal S&Ms and shit. And that people probably shouldn't be like attempting to utilize anything that would ever be illegal. It's illegal to voyeur people. And that your guys' little S&M is the only internal group. That means you guys can bust each other. But you guys can't bring outsiders and be targeting them with your guys' tools in it and shit. Basically. And so, that's where when you guys hinge to my shit, if Lena signed up for that shit, that's her own fault. But don't be hinging to my shit. Don't be hinging to my son's shit. Alright? That stuff's illegal. I never signed up for your guys' shit. Just remember that you guys attempted to build a lawful justification on somebody talking about stuff that's broadcasted across most of the world's dark web being what lawfully signs somebody up for your guys' S&M. That there's no court of law that will ever accept your guys' justification, because that is not a contract. And I know that these damn Mormons sat around going, already talks about, I'll sign them off. That's not legal. What they're doing isn't legal. I wouldn't trust those fucking people at all. Listen to the logic. The court does logic. And that the law enforcement is supposed to do that too. And that, people are stupid as fuck. Don't be using those Mormon temples like ideas like that. Only people that are actively agreeing, even, are the only people that you people can even look at. And that I'm not those people. So don't be hinging your guys' 50 pedo porner to my shit.